Welcome everyone to council chambers this evening. We have a couple of proclamations we're going to start with before we go to our regular meeting and agenda. So the first one is a proclamation. Pardon me? Yeah. First one, you want to hold that, Kimberly? Councilperson Cummings is joining me here. But the National League of Cities has invited members, which we are one, to participate in this recognition. So I'm going to read this first proclamation. Whereas the National Day of Racial Healing is a grassroots initiative aimed at overcoming racial biases and unifying people in the United States to create an environment where all children can thrive. And whereas the day was created as part of a comprehensive effort to address historic and contemporary effects of racism and bring about transformational and sustainable change, and whereas the National Day of Racial Healing was first celebrated in 2017, and whereas the observance of this day offers opportunities for local governments, faith-based groups, philanthropic organizations, educators, businesses, and individuals to get involved and demonstrate their commitment to racial healing, and whereas it is our duty to protect the children of our community and our country and maintain communities in which they may all be given the opportunity to succeed, and whereas we understand there is a racial divide in our community and our country requiring us to work earnestly to heal the wounds created by racial, ethnic, and religious bias, and whereas all children have the right to be provided every opportunity to learn, grow, and thrive in nurturing environments that respect, promote, and protect their safety, dignity, and humanity, and whereas children of color face unique obstacles that prevent their access to opportunity as a result of historical and current systems and practices, and whereas economic conditions of communities across the nation are depressed by racial inequities, and whereas if we all dedicate ourselves to the principles of truth, racial healing, and transformation, we can bring about the necessary changes in thinking and behavior that will propel each community and the nation forward as a unified force where racial biases will become a thing of the past. And whereas the town of Normal, in conjunction with others throughout the nation, acknowledges the National Day of Racial Healing and urges all citizens to promote racial healing and transformation to ensure the best quality of life for every child. And whereas the town of Normal is a proud member of the National League of Cities and part of its National Municipal Learning Community for Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation, and pledges to use the tools from these valued resources to make changes in policies and practices that build racial healing and advance racial equity. Now therefore I, Christopher Coos, President of the Board of Trustees, do hereby proclaim that the town of Normal honors and recognizes Tuesday, January 22nd, 2019 as the 2019 National Day of Racial Healing. And of course I'm not Mayor Coos. I should have introduced myself, but Councilperson Fritzen, and the mayor is in Washington, D.C. right now. And so this is the proclamation for that. Dr. Judy Newbrander would come forward. The ISU School of Nursing is celebrating a special anniversary, and so we have a proclamation that's been prepared for them as well. I'll let you hold that while I got the fancy lettering on it, and I'll read the one that's legible. Whereas in honor of the Illinois State University Mennonite College of Nursing and its commemoration of 100 years of service to the Bloomington Normal community, and whereas the Mennonite Sanitarium Training School was founded on January 23, 1919, upon the approval by representatives from the Mennonite churches at their annual conference, led by Reverend Peter Shantz and Reverend Emmanuel Schroeder, and whereas there was a vision to establish a training school for nurses that would be recognized as one of the best in the nation, the first commencement took place in 1922 with 15 graduates. And whereas the Mennonite School of Nursing provided diplomas to graduates of the program until 1982, when William Dunn, chairman of the Mennonite Hospital School of Nursing Board of Directors, announced the establishment of Mennonite College of Nursing. And whereas in 1985, the last graduation ceremony for diploma students was held, and the first degrees from Mennonite College of Nursing were awarded. And whereas in 1995, the Master of Science in Nursing program was approved, and whereas the Mennonite College of Nursing became Illinois State University's 6th academic college on July 1st, 1999, and whereas the Mennonite College of Nursing has increased its undergraduate enrollment, added 2 sequences to the master's program, and created a doctoral program that includes a Doctor of Philosophy in Nursing and an online Doctor of Nursing Practice, as well as an accelerated BSN option. And whereas in 2011, a state-of-the-art 10,000 square foot nursing simulation lab was opened to provide students with real-life situations using high-fidelity patient simulators. And now, therefore, I, Chris Coos, Mayor of the Town of Normal, do hereby proclaim January 23rd, 2019 as Illinois State University Mennonite College of Nursing 100th anniversary in the Town of Normal, and urge all citizens of Normal to offer best wishes to the members of the Illinois State University Mennonite College of Nursing organization on this memorable occasion of their anniversary and acknowledge their contributions and service to our community. Well, thank you. Yes. Ms. Sherry. Yes. Yeah. Yes, some comments? Sure.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Mennonite College of Nursing, I am honored to receive this proclamation. We are so excited to celebrate a century of providing exceptional nursing education, a feat that would not be possible without the support of the community around us. We are so grateful that Bloomington Normal has embraced Mennonite College of Nursing, allowing its visionary leaders to begin the Mennonite Sanitarium Training School and watching it grow and flex to become what it is today, part of a first-choice, diverse university ranked among the best by U.S. News & World Report, a college committed to excellence, a group of faculty and staff who prepare its students for success, evidenced by the 96% pass rate on the National Nursing Licensure Exam, well above the state and national average. Students who are employed by top healthcare systems, graduates who are tomorrow's leaders, researchers, and visionaries. Mennonite College of Nursing promotes excellence and innovation in education while striving to improve health locally and globally through exceptionally well-prepared nurses. We do this through creative and critical thinking, service to and care for others, and guiding our students to display empathy, openness, advocacy, and purposeful action, and promoting inclusion and diversity. Thank you.
Will you take this with you? Yes. Thank you, and we'll begin the council meeting here. The colleagues will come forward. I envy Dr. Newbrander a bit because she didn't have to say whereas before every sentence she read. So. Call to order the regular normal town council meeting for January 22nd, 2019. If the clerk please call the roll.
Mayor Coos. Mr. Fritzen?
Here.
Mr. McBride?
Here.
Mrs. Cummings?
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Here.
Mr. Preston?
Here.
Mr. McCarthy?
Here.
Begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will begin with public comment. We have 6 people who have requested the opportunity to speak tonight, and we will call them up in the order that they called in and requested that opportunity. We'd ask that you state your name and, if you choose to, your address for the record. And our first speaker is Mark T Tilley.
Good evening, everyone. Mark T Tilley, 1212 Timber Ridge Court. Thank you for having me tonight. I want to start off by thanking Public Works and all the people out there in this weather. Thank you for the job they do. Hope everyone is staying safe. I want to comment on a few of the items on the agenda tonight, beginning with the proposed lease agreement with Representative Brady, Representative Davis. We're not charging them really any money, certainly not fair value for this property. The town pays some of the highest rent in Illinois to outside developers, yet when we have an opportunity to bring outside money into the community through the properties that we own, we're charging them nothing. To me, this is bad governance. A good example of how this affects us, one of the budget proposals before everybody is that you're going to increase the fees on the before and after school program. It's a great program, I've used it many times, but it's going to wind up being a regressive tax on some of the hardest working and most needy people in this community. But if we were charging fair market for these properties that are being rented, we would offset the needed cost increase. We wouldn't need to do it. Okay, so to me, that's a really bad set of priorities. I want to talk briefly about the proposed replat in Blackstone Trails. In the packet, there's a grade B analysis that was done by the Planning Commission, but that was on the original proposal, not the revised one that has 112 less units in it. So I'm sure it would get a much lower grade on that. Finally, on the fire station, I'm imploring the council to use another corner. The Planning Commission repeated over and over that the residents in Blackstone Trails had very valid concerns, but it wasn't their purview to decide if this was the best corner to put the fire station. I personally agree with the relocation of the fire stations with 3 instead of building a 4th. I have no problem with the science that says that the fire station needs to be at that intersection, but common sense says you don't drop it into someone's backyard when you have 3 empty lots right around it. When you get on the bus, you don't go sit next to the guy with an open seat when you've got doubles right next to him. This is not the right thing to do. I sent you guys a study, comprehensive study, 18 years, covering 700 plus new fire stations that says home values drop on average by 5.7% when you put them right next to them. It's a very detailed article. I hope you had a chance to read it. The staff even admits that it could have a negative impact, as they talk about in the packet, saying, well, we will be conscious of the design and the location and the buffer zone. So clearly there's the potential for that, and that's what matters. It's not whether or not Chief Humer is very good about lights and sirens. It's about the perception in the public, in the marketplace, as to what's going to happen to these home values. It comes down to, what are we here for? We're here to serve the residents. Time and again, the council gives money to developers every time they have an increase in cost. If it costs a little more to put a fire station on one of the other 3 corners, please do so. Let's give the residents the same consideration. To me, that's good governance. They're standing up very loudly, telling you what they want out of their government. We need to accommodate that. Thank you.
I ask that everybody please exercise proper decorum for a public business meeting of this nature. This is not an event where cheering, booing, or other such outbursts are appropriate. So next to speak is Debbie Schroeder.
Good evening. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Be careful outside. The walkways are slick. I live at 2501 Fieldstone Court, and I'm one of the backyards that you're considering putting this station at. And I absolutely, categorically vote no. It's wrong. But as I was writing out my thought process, I actually revamped it a little bit because I was very angry when I wrote this. And everybody is wondering why the people of Illinois are leaving. Because what the citizens are saying seems to fall on deaf ears or get on closed-minded people. We already pay high taxes. It's ridiculous. That's why people are leaving this state. But once again, the residents of our subdivision have made their objections known to this forum as well as the City Planning Commission. It has become obvious to us that our objections and views have been for naught. The elected members of this board work for the people. The people do not work for you. The residents were not afforded the due process in this process because, in our opinion, it was rubber stamped. Who runs the city council? The elected officials or the developers? Several residents have asked for copies of the survey or the information that pinpointed that corner of Shepherd and Hershey Road. It is yet to be produced. After 32 years in the state and the federal government, one thing that I learned, that if it's not in writing and not available, it didn't happen. There was no transparency in this decision process. The residents of Blackstone Trails have put a lot of time, a lot of energy, some people taking off work to attend the meetings that a lot of them feel has been a sham process. Our voices and objections feel like they meant nothing to the City Council and the Planning Commission. At every turn, members of this council have told us that they are good stewards with taxpayers' money. I find that hard to believe when other property owners have never been approached as a viable location for this project. Therefore, this is a developer-driven project, not for the people. There are many people within this county and within the city of Normal that live paycheck to paycheck and struggle to pay bills and provide for their families. Just like Mr. Tortelli had just stated, you're going to increase something that a lot of people struggle to pay for. It has become obvious to the residents that the moral compass is broken. The residents of Blackstone Trails will not go away. Their voices will be heard today, tomorrow, and especially at the ballot box. Thank you.
Thank you. Next call up Laurie Weikart.
Good evening. Excuse me. My name's Laurie Weikart. I live at 2500 Fieldstone Court in Normal. And first, I'd like to commend everyone who was part of the proclamation recipients tonight. It was a wonderful thing to witness. I'd also like to thank you for allowing me to speak at what I fear is likely the last opportunity for any of us to be heard on this subject. I'd like to state that I'm absolutely confident that everyone welcomes a fire station and our dedicated firefighters to the area, and we genuinely applaud them for their service and selfless dedication. Regarding the proposed placement of the fire station, and with sincere respect, I don't see this as a case of not in my backyard. Rather, I see this as a case of why in anyone's backyard when it doesn't need to be there, as there are 3 other corners at that same intersection, and those corners do not have any direct residential neighbors. It's a simple question that I don't feel has really been satisfactorily addressed. I have stated this before, but like my neighbors, we were attracted to Blackstone Trails because of the promotion of natural areas, a bit more spaciousness, and some quiet peacefulness. I believe many are concerned as these very important quality of life enhancements that make this area a small haven of calmness seem to be at significant risk with this proposal. Many neighbors have devoted much time and effort emailing and attending government meetings. We had over 50 in attendance at the last planning meeting. Many have been posing questions, offering ideas and possible solutions. However, the proposal thus far as I can tell, has proceeded in a rather unaffected manner as the firehouse and smaller with some slightly enlarged lots for the northwest quadrant remain. I acknowledge that homes were to be built in this subdivision, but I also believed the plan that was promoted was the plan that would be followed and had no reason to believe otherwise. I also had faith in the town's most basic standards for lot width and setback requirements, but I believe those standards are being reduced for this proposal, and if so, I am not in favor of that at all. In closing, I would like to say that I, and I believe others, hope to leave here tonight proud that our local government demonstrated that it values its town members by voting no. Voting no on this proposal means to me that you have heard and respected a good many tax-paying citizens, your constituents, and that you will not be imposing something the vast majority of neighbors and even some community members question or are against. In my respectful opinion, this proposal needs much more work and attention before it could ever be considered mutually agreeable or beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, David Schroeder.
Thank you for the chance to talk to the council this evening. I'd like to make a comment that the trail around Blackstone Trails is really a community asset enjoyed by many. Even outside of Blackstone Trails, there are dog walkers and families who enjoy this trail. And the thought of a large brick structure and parking lots and more commotion is not conducive to this natural environment. And it really is a community asset that you should think about and is enjoyed by many. So how to weigh that into your decision is something I ask you to do tonight. I think you'll hear a lot about how we're perplexed as to why other available lots have not been examined, and we don't really understand why the owner of those lots has not been contacted and negotiated with when so many residents seem to be upset by this decision. So we ask that we take a close examination of those other properties and have some more transparency in that whole process. Also, we, as taxpayers of Blackstone Trails, we pay roughly somewhere between $600,000 and $700,000 in property taxes as residents. A portion of those taxes will go to support a new fire station that obviously the majority of residents object to. And it's a little bit of a double whammy to think that we may have a hit on our property values while at the same time we're building a new firehouse in a location that we object to. We ask for your consideration in that as well. We, as been previously stated, we're in total support of our fire personnel and their commitment and admire the work that they do, but we don't really understand the precise nature of this location and why there aren't reports that we can examine as to how this precise nature was selected. What was the methodology in determining that nature? Who was involved? And if you go a quarter of a mile in another direction, why that is a life and death matter. It seems to lack some common sense. So just ask for your consideration for these points tonight and appreciate the chance to talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Stan Nord.
Hi, my name's Stan Nord, 1020 Balsam in Normal. In an era where paying for your fair share and being fiscally conservative are so often used, I was surprised to learn of a property where the taxpayers purchased in Uptown. This multi-floor building you are renting out for only $2 a year. As elected and hired officials to represent the residents of Normal, I do not understand how collecting only $2 a year is being fiscally conservative and being a good steward of taxpayer funds or assets. With our taxes ever increasing, why are you essentially giving this revenue away? Are there no other people or businesses who want to be in Uptown? And $2 a year is the best that could be obtained? There is no question the gentlemen who rent this building do a great job representing the needs of Normal and their other constituents. My issue is not with the renters. It is to question who is looking out and representing the citizens of Normal in this and other rental arrangements. Each of these renters were elected to represent a much larger population and area than just Normal. For one of these renters, this office is the only office located in their entire district, which is more or less the entire northwest section of McLean County. The other individual represents only a small portion of Normal, yet his reach includes Champaign, Springfield, all the way to the western state line at Carlocksville and as far south as some St. Louis suburbs. Since these gentlemen represent and serve so many more people in towns than just Normal, Why are the residents of Normal paying the entire bill for their offices? It just does not seem reasonable. The cost for these offices should be fully upon the backs of the residents of Normal. I do not know if there are other arrangements the town has with these representatives, though I would hope someone will look into this lease and other town rental properties and ensure taxpayers' interests are represented and that Normalites are not shouldering an unfair tax burden. Next, the fire station. I am not here to question the need of a fire station. The fire department should be commended for the spectacular job they do in keeping us safe and opening their firehouse doors to children and others in our community. As a close resident of a fire station, we are fortunate to have them as neighbors, but they were there before we purchased our home. What I am questioning is who is representing the people in the neighborhood where you want to build this station. I have talked with several of your constituents. They are concerned they were not involved in the decision to put the station next to their homes. There are 3 other corners and plenty of vacant ground within seconds where the station would not impact them nearly as much. There are other options. They were told cost was the reason it would not be located elsewhere. Using cost is inconsistent for something so necessary for the safety of our residents, especially when cost is not an issue for the millions given to cover the financial loss landlords incur for the building of the structures you want in Uptown. Cost is an issue for this need because of overspending on wants elsewhere. So back to representation. The residents, voters, and taxpayers of this neighborhood are in search of someone and are begging for their voice to be represented. Nearly all of them have signed a petition asking someone to represent them, speak for them, and put this station anywhere but immediately next to their homes. This at-large representation system makes it ambiguous to know who actually represents them. So I ask, who of you will represent them and be their voice in government?
And our final speaker is Troy Teves.
Hello, Troy Teves, 1130 Granite Way. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm not going to be as polished as some of these people up here. I really don't have much to add, but more of a possible solution that would kind of be a win-win and win situation. I did want to touch base on a few things to reiterate my points before I offer the solution. We went to the Planning Commission. They indicated time and time again that their job was to rule on that piece of land and that piece of land only. And several times, the neighbors of Blackstone would start trying to bring up other points and would be drawn back to that piece of land, that piece of land only. So I wrote down some points why, I'm going to reiterate some of the points as to why this piece of property is not the best place. It's not zoned properly today, as opposed to tons of land right around there. I know we've indicated the 3 corners at that intersection. I think it's Greenbrier Drive has been connected back to Hershey. There's a perfect corner down there as well. There's tons of land around there within 5, 6, 10 seconds from that corner. It's not in our park or pond. And when I signed up to build this house a year ago, there was a map of 5 phases, I believe. It was 4 or 5 phases of Blackstone. And this wasn't there. I mean, every lot was laid out. I know some of them plotted phase 3 and 4. You can still, I think the sign's still up there. So that, when me and my wife made a decision to build there over the Grove, that was one of the, tales of why we wanted to build there. The bigger lots, the bigger houses, the camaraderie, and not necessarily having smaller houses built in phase 3 and phase 4. There hasn't been much talked about tonight regarding that part of it, but that's a bigger deal to me. My backyard isn't going to be where the fire station is, but I still have the same concern. It's not the best lot for that fire station. I do appreciate the fact that the developer went back and listened to us after the first meeting and tried to revamp their initial plan to keep one of the phases with similar size lots and similar size houses, and really the northwest corner to do smaller, I think tiny houses was the saying in the pantograph, nice small tiny boxes. To me, smaller lots, smaller homes, smaller price brings down our property values. I don't care what anybody does, but just don't get into my wallet. 2-car garages, street parking, congestion, the traffic, the way it's designed, is going to cut through our subdivision. There's nothing north of our subdivision after this is built. So everybody will either go down Hershey or anybody off of Shepherd will cut through our subdivision, which is going to go right through my house and have a 7 and 5-year-old child. More houses, more traffic. That kind of brings me to my solution to this, and I got quoted in the pantograph, which I didn't really realize, but is to cap off our subdivision. Leave it where it's at. It's kind of a win-win-win situation for the people of Blackstone. You leave the dead-end streets there. You put a berm or something behind the existing houses that are on the north edge of the subdivision. You move the fire station to the other end of the subdivision. Then people have the option, if they want to build or buy the station, not have it thrown in there after they've made a decision to go ahead and build or purchase a home. And then the builder can do what he wants. He can do the whole thing, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5 of smaller homes. And that potentially, I don't think that there's anything stopping that today. So if phase 3 starts, they sell well, we could be back here in 5 years. I mean, I don't know. I don't know the legal aspects of that, but today they're proposing this, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't go back just like they proposed originally with Blackstone. And that's pretty much all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate the efforts of those who asked to speak and all the efforts that people associated with these issues have put in to date. And I'm sure we'll have a lively discussion when that agenda item comes up. First order of business on the agenda is our omnibus vote agenda. And these are items that can pass with one vote unless a member of the council wishes to remove one of them for separate consideration. Anyone wish to remove any of the items? I would ask to be excused from voting on the Bloomington offset bill.
Move approval. Second.
Okay. Before we take a vote, the items on the agenda include approval of the minutes of our regular meeting of January 7th, approval of town of normal expenditures for payment as of January 16th, a resolution authorizing the execution of a lease agreement with the Illinois House of Representatives by its agent, Illinois State Representative 105th District Dan Brady, and with the U.S. House of Representatives by its agent, U.S. Representative Rodney Davis. A resolution to authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute a license agreement with Greyhound Lines Incorporated for access to the Uptown Station as a transportation provider. Resolution accepting a proposal from Cardno Incorporated for the repair and restoration of the Park West Detention Basin in the amount of $122,400. A resolution conditionally and partially approving the final plat of the credit union subdivision by expedited process. It's the ISU Credit Union at 1309 South Center Street. A resolution conditionally and partially approving the final plat of the Bryan Drive subdivision by expedited process and waiving development fees. A couple of Habitat for Humanity homes are proposed to be built there. A resolution authorizing the execution of a contract to approve a 3-year towing contract with Joe's Towing and Recovery, and a resolution waiving the formal bidding process and authorizing an agreement with Arbor Professional Solutions Collection Services for ambulance service collections. Clerk, if you'd call the roll, please.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye. Motion passes. Next, under general orders, an ordinance approving a concept plan for Blackstone Trails subdivision.
Move approval. Second.
An approval in a second. Any preliminary comments from staff?
I will just introduce the topic. Mercy Davison is prepared to come up, and I'll invite Mercy up to explain the process and fill council in on how we got to this point and our recommendation, and also the process with the planning commission and such. So she has provided in the packet a lot of information, the reports that went to both planning commission public hearings in both December and January, and quite a bit of material, but Mercy's going to give us pretty much the executive summary of all that.
Yes, I will not cover everything that is in the packet. As you know, Blackstone Trails is at the northeast corner of Hershey and Shepherd. The original plan, which is approved and on file, called for 352 residential lots throughout the subdivision, the bulk of which are slated as detached single-family homes, and then a smaller number as zero lot lines. Of the 352 lots, 121 have been platted in the large lot category, and of those, somewhat more than 80 have been actually built. 28 zero lot lines have been platted and built all along Shepherd. So what we're talking about tonight is two proposals. One is to amend the concept plan for the subdivision, and then the second item is to rezone about 1.74 acres at the southwest corner of the subdivision. The currently proposed concept plan, the amended plan, calls for the same number of lots. So we're still looking at the 352 lots, although 112 of these would be smaller than these originally approved lots. These 112 lots would be in the northwest quadrant of the site. And just to give you a little comparison, the average lot size in the current large lots is about 8,500 square feet. The lot sizes that are being proposed in this northwest quadrant would be something closer to 5,700 square feet. So as the staff report notes, this would require a code variance for the sizes. They're also looking for some setback relief along up to 50% of the front yards. And again, to compare, a 5,700 square foot lot is a little bigger than the lots you see now on Shepherd with the zero lot lines on them. There's also the proposal to rezone property at the southwest corner of the subdivision for a fire station. In this location, the current plan shows that area being all zero lot lines, pretty much identical to what you see on Shepherd right now. In order to build a fire station on this site, we would need to rezone the land to S2, public lands and institutions. If this is approved, there would be another process down the road to subdivide the property into a lot of record and then take a site plan through Planning Commission and Town Council for another approval. Site plan approval is required for anything zoned S2, so there's nothing special about a fire station in that regard. The site plan process is the same as what we just experienced here, the same amount of notice and public hearing opportunities. And a site plan itself would include details like building appearance, outdoor lighting, parking areas, green spaces, landscaping, building setbacks, vehicular access points, and the like. So pretty much everything you'd see on a site. As has been discussed, this proposed fire station location would provide significantly improved response times on the east side of Normal and would enhance mutual aid response times with the city of Bloomington. And this intersection was determined to meet our response time needs after extensive study by the fire department, administration, and then our town GIS specialists. As noted in the reports, staff finds both the revised concept plan and the rezoning to be appropriate per the code, and also to further many important parts of the comprehensive plan, including the need to enhance the efficiency in how we provide public services by locating this public facility next to available infrastructure. Also increasing housing density on an undeveloped site in order to improve the efficiency of public service delivery per residence, specifically called out in the plan that we want to try to do this on areas that are under an annexation agreement but haven't been developed yet. So this is an opportunity that comp plan tells us to take a hard look at. Also, the comp plan calls for increasing the number of smaller single-story homes within our local housing inventory. In regard to the issues raised at the public hearings, staff has tried to explain our response in the reports, but it's probably worth running over quickly. First, I just point out that there's been a lot of emphasis on this Realtor.com article. I think we can question the relevance of that article, given that it's written very broadly based on national data, which are in direct conflict with the local data that we've come across. Our local statistics show that houses near fire stations fare the same, if not better, than other houses throughout the community in regard to property values. We even looked at the fire station number 3 location, which is incredibly similar, and we found that when those lots were yet to be developed, they sold for basically the same price, whether they were next door to the fire station lot or not. We talked to 5 people, or we received letters from 5 people who are pretty much adjacent to fire station number 3 who told us it's never been an issue to live there. They love it. Now, regardless of whether or not they love it, that I don't really care about that so much, but they did specifically say that noise has not been an issue, which has been a major concern for people. So I think between that and the fact that there's been no history of complaints near any of our fire stations, all of which have been located very near residences for decades. And finally, as been mentioned, the fire chief has more than assured everyone that we do have the flexibility to not run lights and sirens all the time unless we're breaking like traffic laws, like running stop signs or speeding. And if a fire station is located at a four-way stop, they don't need to run the stop sign because they're already stopped, and they can't get up to speed for quite a distance. So really, there shouldn't be any need to run the sirens and lights every single time an alarm goes off in the middle of the night. So I think all this together, we hope it reassures some people that the property value impact just isn't there in our community, at least. And the fact and the noise issue does not seem to be an issue for people either. So we've tried to clarify that to the extent possible, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Anyone at the council table with comments? Ms. Lorenz?
Of the two issues that appear to me to be on the table here, one has to do with the replatting of this particular subdivision, and the other has to do with using a portion of it for a fire station. Can you uncouple them, and can you do one? In this case, can you do the replatting of the subdivision but not the fire station? Can you decouple them, or are they interlocked?
Well, I'll respond, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they are definitely connected.
Okay.
Because the developer's plan and the deferral of fees and such
Okay.
presumes there's an arrangement for the town to acquire 1.74 acres. So I think they're connected. I guess that's more of a developer's question on if council votes yes on one thing and no on the other,
Right.
how does that impact their plan?
Okay. And will there be an opportunity to speak to the developer?
We have developer representatives here, and I would ask Mr. Bug if you're willing to talk about that.
That's
Sure.
appropriate now, or at some
Okay.
point.
All those mics on, or is it me?
I think so.
You might wanna turn your
My name is,
It's on.
is it on?
Yeah.
My name is Todd Bug. I live at 1400 Maplewood Drive, and I represent IDEV, the developer. We have worked extensively to work through this entire plan. For anyone who was at the first Planning Commission meeting, we had a plan at that time to go with smaller lots throughout the entire north portion of the subdivision. And after listening to some of the concerns both of that commission and the people in the neighborhood, we came back with this idea to work it with the northwest quadrant only. And that is a very important part of marketing for my client. We believe that the way the community buys houses now, because of some of the movement with State Farm and also because of the economy, has led us to wanting to market a very high-end but smaller home. We believe that those values will be in line with the existing homes that have been built before, taking into account the changing economics of the community and the housing market. And for us to be able to do that is very important, and we want to be able to do it all as a piece, including our work with the town, with the fire station. We appreciate the input that we've gotten from the community. We appreciate the input we've gotten and the ability to work with staff. The time that was spent in two-hour meetings with the Planning Commission. And we would like to go forward as a piece because I think from a marketing standpoint and from just the way the subdivision hopefully is going to work, to do it together is the way to do it.
Okay.
And I'm happy to answer any other questions or go back and sit down and be quiet.
Just hypothetically speaking, if your plan were to pass, but then the fire station, the next item not, what would you do?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's just the honest answer.
Okay.
I don't know how we would have to approach that at that time.
Okay.
I really don't.
Okay. Well, that says something right there. So thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Why don't you just stay there until we get through, cycle through everybody's
Sure.
comments? Anyone else? Whether you need Mr. Bug or not. Mr. McCarthy?
So much to talk about tonight. Excuse me, my voice has been a little off, so I'll try to speak into the microphone. I guess first I want to thank everybody for coming tonight and sharing your feedback. I know this has been a frustrating process for some of you and a difficult process for others. I know it's been a very personal and emotional topic for some others. I guess I want to start off by addressing a couple of the concerns that I've heard in emails and some I've heard tonight and before tonight. I guess I want to personally say that town staff and the planning commission and my counterparts here, we are all listening, and we've been listening. And this particular topic has received more public input, more consideration, more review, more double checking than almost any other issue since I've been in this seat for 6 years. It's gotten a lot of staff time, and that's not a bad thing. I'm just sharing with you perspective from this side of the conversation. And apparently the developer's been willing to listen to your concerns and make some changes as well. As you know, we're considering really two things tonight. One is a new plan for the development and rezoning from R2 to S2, a proposed fire station lot. I'm going to talk a little broader than that, and I'm sure Mr. Day will let me know if I'm going too far afield, but I'm pretty sure I'll stay on topic. First, I want to say thanks for the town staff, Ms. Davison, Mr. Tremmel, Chief Humer, and your team and staff. I know you've put a lot of effort to making this an open and accessible process, and trying to give as much notice to the process to give input that has been possible through all of our communication channels, and I think you've done a really good job with that. At the end of this process, some people are not going to be happy, no matter what we decide. There's no way around it. We heard tonight, and I've heard in emails over the last few weeks, that if we represent well, we'll vote in favor of those who dissent. If that were true, we would not be sitting in this building. There would be no uptown development. There would be no Constitution Trail. There would be no parks and swimming pools because somebody voiced opposition to all of those things. Yet many of us really appreciate uptown and some of those amenities. The Constitution Trail had lots of opposition, but the council moved forward with that despite some very public outcry. I just want to remind everybody that when we're looking at topics and making decisions about topics that are very important, that there's always going to be some people that are not happy with the decision either way. I still think that means that this body is attempting to do what's best for the community and ultimately, hopefully will, but that some are not going to be happy. I've learned a lot so far, and believe it or not, I'm encouraged by our process, not because of any outcomes that we're gonna vote on or what ultimately happens in this process, or by the outcome, but as challenging, as difficult, and as emotionally and frustrating for some that this process has been, it's been very inclusionary. Staff's collected and documented and shared with us all the feedback from the residents that opposed this issue, all of it, as evidenced by a 182-page packet and many emails that we've gotten from all of you, petitions, paragraph articles. There's been a lot of information, shared planning commission notes, the 2-hour meetings that Mr. Bug referred to. They've proactively reached out and received unbiased feedback from residents that actually live next to existing fire stations to get their opinions on the concerns that have been voiced. Chief Humer and his team have certainly heard the noise, excuse me, concerns that have been expressed, and he assures us that their policy has been and will continue to be to use discretion with sirens, particularly at night, to try to minimize the disruptions in their neighborhoods. And we've heard from existing homeowners that live next to fire stations that that is in fact how the fire department operates, that there's been very little, if any, disruption at their homes. And we've heard more that it's not just about the consideration that the fire department operates under, it's that they're good neighbors in their neighborhoods. In fact, I know all of us just received an email this week from somebody, a resident of the town of Normal who lives close to the College Avenue fire station, who's voicing opposition for us moving that fire station because of the amenities that that provides in that neighborhood, because it's such an important amenity they feel for their neighborhood. Staff also took time to research and seek external professional feedback about the property value concern that's been raised. Ms. Davison spoke to that this evening, and the thing that struck me is that we've seen general rural data, but we've been able to bring together some actual specific local data to what's actually happening in our market, not what's happening other places in the country, but what's really happening here. And that data and the experience of the homeowners that live next to our fire stations are telling us that their home values are not being negatively affected. Actual people that live here and are experiencing it today. I'm encouraged because staff has invited to this discussion all viewpoints, and that they've been willing to consider and share with us all of those perspectives so we can try to make the best decision that's possible. I know the chief and your team have looked at many, many options to find the best solution, and I appreciate that. And I know it hasn't just been about public safety, it's also been about how do we minimize negative impact wherever you put the fire station ultimately. I appreciate that you've maintained an open mind and tried to run a lot of scenarios. I know that still doesn't make some people happy though. And although on a limited basis, what the developer does, at least it relates to the code, is our purview, but the rest of it is really you as a business folks and what you do. But I appreciate that you've been willing to listen and reduce, I think it was 41 to 50 lots from the original plan that what you wanted to do, and coming back with a plan that is the original number of lots and houses that was originally planned from the beginning. And I appreciate that you've been willing to be good compromise partners in this as well. So I appreciate that. I greatly appreciate everybody here from Blackstone Trails. Again, I know this has been a frustrating process for you. I do. We've heard it. We've gotten all your emails and we read them. I hope at the end of this that everything that I just talked about that's gone on, the changes and what's happened at the development at the behest of you and some town staff, that those changes have happened, all the research, all the proactive reaching out to investigate your concerns is all happened. All that work, all that time, all that energy, all that input has happened in large part at your behest, because the concerns that you have concerned and voiced to the town, that is a big impact of town time, energy, resources, effort to try to make sure that we've got all the right information to make the best decision that we can. I greatly appreciate and sincerely appreciate all of that input, and for staff and everyone who's been involved in this process so we can find the best way forward. I'm supportive of the proposals.
Others? Mr. Preston.
Thank you. I'll start out thanking some individuals who've put a lot of time and a lot of days of their life these last couple months into this issue. First of all, to our fire department, thank you to the chief, our assistant chiefs, and the team. Obviously, we so greatly value you guys protecting the people of Normal and being able to do your job as effectively and efficiently as possible. So thank you. To staff, thank you for the time and the consideration that has gone into this process. I know it has not been one, as has been referenced, has not been one that has been quick or simple or necessarily all that straightforward. And then also, very importantly, thank you to the people who actually are going to be looking at this fire station out their backyard or their side yard every day if it ends up going through here, the residents of Blackstone Trails. I am sitting up here and I'm thinking about, reflecting back to about 2 months ago when we were sitting in the living room of one of the residents there at Blackstone who was very gracious to open up their home. Councilmember Lorenz and I were there. City Manager Reese, some fire department staff, Planner Davison, and a number of others, and probably 25 or so residents of the neighborhood. And, that initial meeting and get-together of folks in the neighborhood came out of the original suggestion that this issue came up out of nowhere. And we were kind of blindsided by it, and we want to be involved in the process ahead of time. And so, looking at getting together and putting that neighborhood meeting together as an opportunity to begin the process of opening up the dialogue more. Sitting here today, there are a couple things that from that point in the end of November with the first neighborhood meeting till now, still just, still just don't quite have resolution to me. And I guess the first topic is a question for staff. And that would be asking staff to kind of walk us through a little bit of the site selection process or the due diligence process for determining this specific site as it relates to the fire station, this northeast corner of the intersection.
Sure. The process began with the fire department coordinating with our GIS coordinator, some analyses through our software to determine run distances from various sites. And we've looked at sites all over that northeast area. And so after looking at run distance, and I think some of those maps Chief Humer may have shared back in November, when we looked at the time, how long it takes to run fire apparatus from this particular intersection out to Mercy Creek, which is the farthest east location in town, to in the central part of town in terms of covering backup for headquarters and runs, and how long does it take to get into town, and how far can we get in our standard 5.5 to 6 minute window, and also up on the interstate. So basically that analysis of how far can we go and where can we get to in 5.5 to 6 minutes, with the trying to get, I believe it's 80% of the time we want 90% of the time, thank you, Chief, to respond to a caller within 6 minutes. So from there, we looked at this intersection being the best location, really ideal. And for most of the corners, 3 of the 4 corners of the intersection, utilities are available to us. And then when we looked at the northeast corner of the intersection, that is currently zoned R2, residential use. The other 3 corners are commercial. Certainly, if cost is a factor, that alone is significant difference between one parcel over the other 3. And then we also look at the trail. There is an existing trail, which is anywhere from 70 to 90 foot width between the trail and the green space that is municipal. So it's public trail, public green space. From an urban planning perspective, that makes sense to us to locate an S2 use next to an existing S2 public use. And on top of that, we also believe that with both Shepherd and Hershey roads being, I believe they're classified as major collector streets, that is oftentimes where you will find institutional and commercial uses. So from an urban planning perspective, that makes sense. And so then we looked at, for this site, how could a fire station be located? Does this make sense? So, some of these factors, many are objective and some are subjective, but that's how we get to that particular site. If the residents could specifically identify what about a fire station is specifically unacceptable, if it's noise, if it's appearance, if it's lighting, those sorts of things we can certainly work to address. If it's just, it needs to be across the street, that's a little bit more difficult to try to figure out how that can be addressed. There's no middle ground then. Is that helpful?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. And I guess kind of follow up. Do we, as a matter of process, as a municipality, are there any kinds of specific things that we are, required to do when looking at land acquisition? And what I'm kind of thinking of is like, obviously we put out RFPs, for certain things, and with the land acquisition specifically, that doesn't make any sense. But like, are we required to look at multiple, comparable sites within a given location, or talk to multiple owners of property in a location if they are available and within the proximity? Is there anything that we're held to doing in terms of the process for land acquisition?
No, I don't believe so. I think there's a very defined process if we were trying to get rid of or sell some land, then we certainly know what we have to do that. In terms of land acquisition, in this particular instance, I'll let Mr. Day supplement in a minute, but in this particular instance, when we determined that this site makes good sense, in our opinion, for an S2 use in a fire station, then the opportunity presented itself when we were able to speak to Mr. Trunk and the IDEV folks. So in terms of a process for land acquisition, I'll ask Mr. Day if there's any parameters on that.
No, there are no legal requirements.
And I will also then add, thank you, Mr. Day, we're not novices to acquiring land. We have gone through this process numerous times, even for small amounts, for right-of-way, for all sorts of land acquisition matters. We used a similar process just in terms of negotiation with a property owner.
And I'll try and be brief with a couple more comments if you don't mind. So I think City Manager Reese brought up a good point, and it's one that I've kind of tried to narrow down as well. In looking at this issue, I personally have heard a number of different concerns and hesitations in response to locating a fire station in this specific spot. And as I've kind of worked through them personally, and again, it's just me, there are some that I just kind of consider a wash, one of which is the impact on property values. I mean, we have heard evidence, and we've heard individuals, we've, seen stories and seen research that has shown that it has no impact or potentially a beneficial impact, and those that it could have a negative impact. In my mind, that just becomes kind of subjective that, if you sell your house and it sells for $5,000 or $10,000 less than you think it should, how can you actually attribute that to the fire station compared to something else, compared to the market, compared to other inventory out there, whatever. So that, I'll leave that one there. Second one is with noise. I don't believe I have heard any complaints about the larger concept of having a fire station on the east side of Normal. Our current response times out there, certainly if you're going out to Mercy Creek, in the far northeast portion of the community, are pushing, if I'm not mistaken, 9.5 or 10 minutes almost. That is, that is something that I would hope, everybody sees the tremendous need and value for, right, is being able to provide the resources for our fire professionals to be able to do their job effectively and efficiently. And so, tying that in, with that in mind, the concerns about noise. Anywhere that a fire station were to be located, if we accept that East Side Fire is an absolute need, not only has it been part of our plan for some time, but that it's an absolute need for us, I don't see a scenario where noise wouldn't be an issue. Shepherd Road is a major thoroughfare that, if a fire station is located in any of the other three corners of the intersection of Shepherd and Hershey, and it's going to Normal Community or Eastview or somewhere where it has to go east onto Shepherd Road, it doesn't matter what, corner of that intersection the fire truck started at, it's got to go down Shepherd Road, and there will be, sirens will be going. So, that I leave there. The thing that I cannot, though, kind of reconcile is, the notion that our conversations seem to be focused and limited with a specific property owner, when, candidly, I think the residents of Blackstone are absolutely right. You look out, your front door on Shepherd, and just about as far as the eye can see in every direction, there is plenty of vacant farmland that could be developed. And I think we all know that, a large portion of that, and certainly the other three corners of the intersection of Shepherd and Hershey, are owned by the same individual or corporation. But, I'm of the belief that at the very least, we owe it to the residents of Blackstone Trails to engage at least a conversation that, to my knowledge, I don't think has, specifically taken place recently as we've been going through this process the last couple months, and engage that conversation to know, exactly what are the alternatives? So we say it costs more. How much more? What are we actually talking? I think that a lot of the concerns that the residents of Blackstone have brought up make a lot of sense. And frankly, any notion that, to dismiss some of the hesitations and concerns that we've heard and, equate it to, well, it's just a dissenting voice, and, if we followed voices of dissension, we wouldn't have Uptown. I don't think that is this situation at all. In fact, I think it's the contrary. And I used to live in Blackstone Trails. It's a tremendous neighborhood. The people are great, and we're up here elected to serve them. I don't think they could have made their voices much louder than they have, and they need a voice, and they're right.
Others? Ms. Cummings?
First of all, I want to thank everyone who spoke today. For me, this has been definitely I want everyone to know that we are listening and that we hear you. Whatever decision is made tonight, please understand that by no means was it taken lightly. This is certainly of heavy nature in the sense that it does deal in people's livelihoods. It's on all accounts. There are those who need the service, and how do we accommodate and make sure that we are being responsive and providing good service. There are those who have concerns of what are we doing within the area in which they live. And then there are those who have other concerns, whether it be on property values, and it can run the gamut. I certainly appreciate the engagement. And so do not feel like no matter what happens tonight, stay engaged and stay involved. If we could, for me, I want to make sure that I'm clarified on one small thing, if that's okay. Because I know everything is now starting to mesh together in the conversation. So I need to be sure as I go forward and as we present the individual pieces, because now even when you read all of these things, just a little word of advice, when you read all these things after a while, it all meshes together with you. So for me, so that my brain can start to take it apart a little bit here. The first piece, first ordinance, is on the concept plan itself. And the concept plan incorporates the ideal of a fire station. Am I correct?
That is correct, yes.
So with that, those go hand in hand.
Yes.
Then the second piece is the zoning
Right,
for
the
that
rezoning.
the second, for that small portion. Correct.
That is correct.
Okay. With tonight's voting, just to make sure, would there necessarily be a need for the second one if we do not get a vote for yes on the first one?
Well, I'm going to say yes, and I'll let staff correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that if council does not support the rezoning to S2, that vacant land at the northeast corner of the intersection, the developer does not show as residential anymore. So I think that that would have to go back to showing residential. So how would we do that, Mercy?
I don't know. Trying to think if that would be any sort of like minor,
I'm wondering if it would still have to come back.
Ms. Cummings asked if we vote no on the first item.
Right.
Is there any reason to vote? So if we vote no on the first item, we wouldn't
Right.
have that change, right?
Correct. That I think is true.
Okay. Want to make sure.
It's all meshing together again, yeah.
Okay. So, and then my other piece then, I know that there was lots of wording or education on the process based off of the second one being voted yes, meaning just the rezoning. I don't know if that was maybe the way I read it wrong, or it's talked about if voted yes, here would be the gamut of next steps. And maybe my brain is running together. It might be in the first one.
Right, I think the next steps just show it in the zoning map amendment.
Right,
Okay.
so I think like if we take out the developer's perspective on whether these items should, what they think about one being approved and not one not being approved, like just purely from a process perspective, I suppose, correct me if I'm wrong, if you voted against the rezoning, but you voted for the concept plan, you'd have a concept plan with like a little hole at the bottom left corner of the concept plan. There's nothing showing there right now. So I guess in theory, I don't know if we'd make them go back through to amend a concept plan to show what I'd have to assume would be some more houses. It would be kind of a minor change in the grand scheme of things. So I don't know that that really matters. I mean, I suppose if the zoning goes away, the logical thing is that some sort of residential goes back there. If the concept plan doesn't get approved, then we're kind of back to the original concept plan, which does not show a fire station at the southwest corner. So really, if, you know, the concept
And it
plan.
also doesn't show the smaller lots, it's just the original plan.
Yeah, you just go
as
back to the
already
original
adopted.
plan, and the zoning doesn't make sense anymore if you don't approve the concept plan.
I'm gonna take it a step further, and I don't mean to be a pain in the
No, that's
butt.
okay. I mean, it feels like they do, I guess ideally they do go together. It's hard to pick them apart, but if we had to, I suppose we could figure it out.
So I'm gonna go a step further. Let's say we do vote yes, okay, just theory. We vote yes, which I know there's now a next steps for design.
Right.
It's a whole nother level. If then, through design, we say no, because we don't, for whatever reasons, the design does not meet the expectations or the needs or address as many of the concerns as we could possibly address, then what would happen?
Well, I mean, that is a little hard to imagine, only because there is so much flexibility, but like, so you basically have a chunk of S2 property sitting there at the corner, and we could never agree on a fire station design, then you'd just have S2 zoning sitting at the corner, and I suppose you'd probably want to come back and someone might ask to rezone it back to residential. That would be a possibility, you know.
That is a possibility. In the meantime, the Parks and Recreation Department would continue to maintain it.
Yeah,
like
presuming we would
do
own it at
the-
that point,
The trail
then.
and, yeah, presuming we closed on that, yeah.
Right.
But in terms of the design, now I think I'm catching up to you. In terms of the design of a fire station, which it would be our plan that this wouldn't probably for a couple of years, we would try to take into consideration not just code, but neighborhood input and make sure that it would be complementary to what we want out there, to what the neighborhood wants.
And how would that, and I know it does, because I think in the packet it talked about too, that there would be time for open comment. If, say, we get to that point, how would the constituents, especially those who live over in Blackstone Trail, be able to assist in that and be diligent and really voice, this is what we want to see, or this is what we would like, that would make us feel somewhat better about our new neighbors that we really don't want here?
Sure. So, I mean, there's the formal code process where we would have to file a set of plans to be published. The notice would be published in the newspaper, and that basically starts the clock ticking on a couple weeks, at least between 2 and 4 weeks of giving the public basically notice that they can come on into City Hall and look at the plans, like see what it is that we're proposing. We send notice to all property owners within 400 feet, although in this kind of case, we typically just send it to the whole subdivision because everybody's obviously interested. We send that out as a postcard notice. We put a sign on the location itself so that people driving by will see it. And it basically says, call the town planner if you have questions. There's some sort of zoning thing going on. We put that out usually a week or two in advance. And then we have the public hearing with the planning commission. And then depending on what happens there, it comes to you at some point for a vote. I mean, that's the minimum that we have to do. So, I mean, this time it got carried over, so there was a few extra weeks of input and back and forth. But yeah, that's the minimum.
In regard to the actual design of a fire station, though, I mean, we could certainly we'll be talking to council to get public, your perspective on design concept and such, and so there will be opportunity for public input and public reaction to that. If we want to do something prior to a concept design, then we could make sure we plan some public input meetings and invite people to come. We've talked about that in terms of kind of IDOT open house style kind of things. So there are some options we can do.
Anything further? Ms. Cummings?
No, thank you. That's all.
I'm going to go back to Ms. Lorenz, because I think you were wanting to piggyback a little bit on Mr. Preston, and then we'll go to Mr. McBride.
I know.
You sure? Okay. Mr. McBride?
But come back to me afterwards.
Yeah, you-
Give Mr. McBride a
Thank
chance.
you.
He hasn't said anything.
Which we all know is really unusual, right? Question for staff, and I'm going to not use any adjectives here, but let's say for the sake of argument, hypothetically, these are both approved tonight, and if things go at their most expedient, how far down the road, how long will it be before a fire station is open on that site, approximately?
I'm looking at Chief Humor. I don't think we planned to have, we don't even have anything budgeted, so.
Right.
Maybe design in 2021, but not construction. So,
So at its most expedient, we're still talking 3 years
before it's occupied?
beyond.
Well, hopefully by 3 years.
Okay, so 3 years-ish,
Yeah.
give or take. There's a reason I'm asking that. So I think it's important to keep in mind the overarching issue. And again, councils before most of the folks sitting up here got to work on creating this overarching plan for fire coverage for the entire community. And I don't think anybody in this room disagrees on the importance with that. But I think there is some tension between having some sort of sense of urgency, knowing that we still have some pretty relatively lengthy response times to a lot of locations east of Veterans Parkway, including a high school, including a large church, including a lot of neighbors, including a couple of parks. So I think it's very important that we keep that in mind. So we can't sit on this forever. So just put a pin in that, I guess, for a second. I also would like to kind of echo something that Ms. Davison said earlier about how this particular property, this particular corner, fits in very well with a lot of the goals as stated by our comprehensive plan, which was a very lengthy and a very arduous and I think a very successful process. Also, kind of a shout out to the Planning Commission. And I understand the frustration we've heard from one or two public speakers tonight and from some others who have emailed us. And again, as others have said, we do read those. Yes, the Planning Commission's role is to determine whether it's appropriate for land use. Now, I know that when I and Ms. Lorenz were on Planning Commission, we didn't always necessarily stick to the letter of that, but I think it's really important to acknowledge the fact that the Planning Commission listened, and that's not necessarily an easy thing to do, to sit up here and listen to folks who are upset, understandably. They did listen, and I think that's worth noting too. And I know Mr. Shields is here tonight, and we appreciate you doing that, and the rest of your colleagues. Thank you. It's also important to remember, for those who testified before the Planning Commission on 2 occasions, that your remarks were recorded. They were presented in front of the public. The news media was here to hear those on several occasions, or on a couple of occasions. Some of us were here to hear those. And of course, they're all gathered in the minutes of those meetings, which are included in the packet. So you did have an opportunity to speak. And you were listened to, and I think that was taken seriously. So I just hope that there's some recognition of that. And I also appreciate the fact that it's not easy necessarily for neighbors to come up to these tables and express your opinions. I know that for some of you, that's outside of your comfort zone. So but it's an important part of the process. So thanks to all involved. I also want to note that we have heard from some neighbors that they actually are in favor of this project. And I keep coming back to these letters from those who live near Fire Station 3 who say that the impacts that so many are concerned about are really not issues. And I think if we move forward tonight, that's still an if, I think perhaps when we get to a design phase, some of those concerns might be allayed.
Thank you. Ms. Lorenz?
Okay. Thank you. So I am a dweller near Fire Station 3. I'll be sad the day that it moves further away from my house. So, you know, I like a fire station nearby. But I guess that kind of falls in the category of, you know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So, you know, what I like may not be what the next person likes, and so on. So, you know, I've been hearing things about, you know, the fire station. I've heard some of the comments today about the development itself, the goodness or badness of that. You know, we hear somewhat about noise, somewhat about property values. And so there's a variation there. But there is one sort of common thread, I think, through all of the comments and emails that we've received. And this leads me, well, and that thread is about the process itself. And I was taking notes during the comments. Why hasn't the other property owner been contacted? What was the methodology? And so, tagging on to something that Mr. Preston said just a minute ago too, raised that question as well. So with that, seeking a solution, I'm wondering if I could please entertain a motion to table this for the allotted time, and I'm going to turn to Mr. Day here in a moment. That's either to the next meeting or 30 days. I'm not sure which. But a period of time in which time that our staff could go and do just that and go speak to that other or others, I think it's just one, property owner. Face to face, we got the situation, what can you do for us? And if in fact it turns out the way our belief is at this point that stated prices are much higher, there would be the need for more site development, all of those things, and it's such that we come back and you say, okay, this one's, you know, $500,000, the one that we're looking at, and the others are, you know, $1.2 million to $2.5 million, you know, A, B, C, and D. That's what I believe I hear the common thread through all of the comments and emails. And so with that said, I would like to entertain a motion and see if it passes to table this for 30 days or till the next meeting.
If I understanding your motion correctly, the proper motion is a motion to postpone to a definite time, and that would be until the next regular scheduled meeting,
Okay.
unless you wanted a special meeting sooner.
I will like to offer a motion to postpone until the next meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Preston seconds.
Thank you.
Since it's not a motion to table, we can have discussion on this motion. So any discussion on the motions on the table? Okay, hearing none. Oh, Mr. Preston?
Yeah, we're discussing the motion to.
This motion, yes.
Yeah. I mean, my only, you know, comment is kind of playing off my original that, you know, I don't see, one, what the harm is, and two, then personally, you know, it just doesn't make sense to me that we would get involved with a land acquisition deal without actually knowing what the other, you know, three corners of that intersection, I mean, we don't even know what we're talking about in terms of, well, they're going to cost more. You know, a decision like this, I think, should be made with all of the facts, and if, you know, it's still the best decision, it's still the best decision, but when you know, I'm of the belief that having all of the information and hard numbers when making that analysis is important. And also, I would suggest, it's an idea that has gotten floated out a couple times amongst some individuals who have spoken and sent emails to. Potentially, there's an opportunity too for IDEV, the current developer, you know, to see if there's a way where it would potentially make sense, and we could, instead of putting it down at the intersection at Shepherd, moving it further north, you know, in the new phase of the neighborhood. I mean, that, you know, that's something that I'd be, that I think is a conversation that should at least be entertained as well. And as a result, I certainly support the 2-week postponement. That will not, 2 weeks. Well, I think it's consequential in the amount of information that we can get and hard information. It is, I don't believe, consequential in the overarching urge of moving this process forward. So I'd support the motion.
Ms. Reese?
Oh, Ms. Cummings, do you want to go first?
It
Go ahead,
doesn't
Ms.
matter.
Cummings.
Can someone clarify for me? I received an email earlier today at 2:47 with some information, and I think it has some data in it. May I ask where it came from? Because for some reason I'm hearing things that contradict what I saw in that.
I don't know. What email are you referencing?
The one that has some of the
Was that from
information.
staff?
It talks about what the cost would be for, the approximate cost would be for utilizing the northwest corner. Because I keep hearing that we don't have any data at all, but I know it's not everything, but there is some information in there. So I'm kind of confused when people say we have no
I think
data.
that email is referencing the northwest corner of the subdivision, not the
Okay.
northwest corner of the intersection, because
Okay.
of the
Thank you
need
for
to
the
improve Rab Road and whatever, should the fire station be located farther north.
Thank you.
Yes.
And that was in response to an email from a resident who asked if we could consider moving from
I
the
just needed
Shepherd
to be
intersection
clarified.
to the Rab Road intersection. So,
Thank you for the clarification.
and just for the public understanding, the staff's concern with moving a fire station to the northwest corner of the subdivision, which would be the southeast corner of Rab and Hershey, Rab Road is not improved there. And in fact, on occasion, that road is closed down because we don't want so much traffic there under certain conditions. So that road is not improved. We figured to improve Rab Road between Hershey and North Point could be approximately $2.5, maybe a little more, $1 million. And so if a fire station is that far north on Hershey, we would have to drive all the way south to Shepherd in order to go east. So. And one comment I was going to make about the motion is just if this motion passes, I think that I'm going to need much more direction on what it is you're looking for, because ordinarily, the price we're willing to pay for land is a private discussion in executive session. And so, any conversations I have with another property owner, a specific price, is generally between us in executive session as an acceptable conversation to have in a closed session. So I would need a little bit clearer direction on what my targets are and the parameters in order to come back in a public meeting 2 weeks from now.
Do you want me to provide?
No.
Oh, okay.
That's
Okay.
it.
Okay. At another time.
Because as Ms. Reese stated,
Okay.
we get into, that's one reason real estate transactions is one of the protected
Yeah,
things
right.
for executive session, because public business needs to be,
Got it. Yeah.
can't always be conducted in public.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain transactions that have to be done, and it's part of the consternation, I think, with this whole process here. Some of the problems with the process are inherent in the fact that this is a real estate transaction initially, and so there are just things that are better that have to be done in private. Any other, Mr. McCarthy?
Thanks for that email and information earlier today, by the way. Doing a quick job evaluating the northwest corner for us in terms of cost and difficulty. And that right now it doesn't seem to be from a near $3 million by the time we buy the land to be a feasible solution in that northwest corner of the subdivision. I do have a question, and I'm not sure who on staff this would be appropriate to point it to. try and make sure I ask this in a public forum appropriate question. Have we investigated potential costs for property at the other three corners without asking specific cost pricing or anything that's inappropriate in this public setting?
I can offer that we have done a cursory review, so to speak, of the other three corners, and looked at more of the elevation and the site issues associated with each in regard to what appears to be a drainage way through some of it. The elevation on the southeast corner is significantly different than the elevation on the northeast corner. So we've looked at some of those issues at a very high level with our engineering staff.
So you've done a high level of analysis of those properties and the associated costs. And I do know that the pricing for those lots is out on a website and available. And so it's no secret what's being charged for those lots. Now, whether or not that's the actual price when the town approaches, because as we all know, that when the town approaches to buy a property, magically the price tends to go up. Unfortunately, that seems to be the way it works, at least in the last 6 years that I've been involved in the council. So we've done some level of consideration of site costs, analysis, seeing what's at least publicly published about the pricing. Okay.
That is correct. And for example, we know that water would need to be extended to serve the southeast corner. So, I mean, we've done some very high level review.
So there's some utility work on
Correct.
top of, so additional cost on top of that,
Yes.
of the land acquisition cost.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
That's kind of the comment I was going to make, is that even though we haven't spoken to the owner of those properties that have been mentioned, we do have market knowledge, and they are zoned commercial. So based on the zoning, based on the market knowledge of other development in the area, on property owned by, originally owned by the same individual that's we're discussing here, I think there's a reasonable expectation to know that the cost is going to be higher than the one we're looking at. So, but again, that's a subjective judgment and the one that's been made to this point. So any other discussion on this motion to postpone until the second meeting, or the next meeting, our next meeting? Hearing none, clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. McBride?
No.
Mrs. Cummings?
No.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
No.
Mr. Fritzen?
No. The motion fails, and we return to the original motion to approve. Any additional discussion on it? A couple of things I want to add. I think we heard Ms. Reese provide the report that's been referenced. I don't know that there is a written report about the selection process. It's been an accumulation of different things, but she specifically mentioned a GIS review to check run distances and response times that helped identify this intersection. We talked about the zoning, that this is R2 zoning and next to S2 zoning, and the availability of infrastructure and major collector streets. And so I think that's the report in a nutshell, really, that led us to identify this particular piece of property. So a very solid approach, I think, to determining where's the best place to put it. Ever since residential jumped Veterans Parkway in a significant manner, providing fire protection has been a point of discussion. Once a grade school was built in the area, fire protection became an even, I was going to say hotter point of discussion. That's not the good choice of words. When a high school is built there, the same thing. When a large a church where thousands of people gather weekly locates in this section of the community, again, pushes that need even harder into our thought process and our planning. And so we have, for going on 15 to 20 years at least, been talking about how do we improve our response times to the east side of Veterans Parkway. And so this is something that even though the specific location appears to have come out of nowhere, it's been something that has been talked about for many years in strategic planning sessions at staff level. Of course, a few years ago, we did the comprehensive fire study that led us to decide 3 fire stations can service the land that makes up the town of Normal just as effectively as building a 4th station, or maybe even more so, without incurring the considerable expense. The expense of, the biggest expense, as we looked at our budget recently, the biggest expense for the municipality is personnel. And building a 4th fire station, we're talking multiple shifts, we're talking a considerable increase in the number of personnel, fire personnel, to the tune, I think, in the reports there, compensation of over $1.2 million a year, and a negotiated contract where there are negotiated increases from year to year. So that's an ongoing expense. Personnel is a big expense, and it's a necessary expense, and it's one that doesn't go away readily. Obviously, we have, for budgetary reasons, some positions were eliminated or allowed to go away, in the past couple of years. But typically, once you have personnel, especially in fire protection or responders, first responders in particular, those expenses are not going to go away. So again, part of a plan, which is what the town has been known for decades now, is planning in a responsible way, and that plan was 3 fire stations will do it, and one of them will be east of Veterans Parkway. Yes, you can look at empty property and say there are any number of places where you can locate a new fire station. And I suppose that's true. But I think, again, as Ms. Reese identified earlier, the process that we went through, the staff went through, methodically to determine where is the best location, and we landed here at this intersection. Now, on this intersection, the best corner of the intersection is the one that we've identified. I know for years, after Ironwood was built, that was a concern we heard regularly from residents of Ironwood, was fire protection, first responder protection, and eventually that led to station number 3 and whatever. And of course, now we're looking at relocating it as well. But those are the process that has kind of taken some hits is the process that's been in place for a long time. It's every subdivision that's come before the town in the last in the last 30 to 40 years has gone through this same process where and the town is really in a reactionary position a lot of times to these things. A developer or someone who has business that has to come through the planning commission, they present it first, and then the town responds and reacts to that. We evaluate the plan, and we have an appointed group of people that serve on the planning commission, and yes, their role is different than ours. And Mr. McBride and Ms. Lorenz will confirm that they can make a recommendation to approve or disapprove of a certain item, and it comes to this body, and this body doesn't always vote in the same manner as what the recommendation came to us from the Planning Commission. So the process works because the Planning Commission is there to evaluate the plan, see how it adheres to the codes and ordinances of the town of Normal. When it comes to the council honors that, but they also look from a policy standpoint, what's the best policy decision to be made here? Are we willing to allow waivers if waivers have been requested, or to negotiate somewhat with a developer or someone who's brought the business before us? Because there are certain things from a policy standpoint that do make sense and override sometimes, the codes and ordinances where we're allowed to tweak those things. So the process is one that has worked well for the town, and I think it worked well in this situation. And I think Mr. McCarthy did a good job of outlining why that's so. I think when it comes to representation, the thing we have to remember is as elected officials, we do have to represent the community first, not individuals. All of us have received emails, phone calls, innumerable contact over the years from different citizens who have their own point of view on something. I have some folks on the west side who have a particular interest in creek maintenance. And, I try to represent their needs to staff and to my colleagues and as expressed, but that's my role, is to bring it to the table and to the staff and to their attention to see what can we do. But my role isn't necessarily to give them what they asked for, because what they asked for may not be to the best interest of the community. And that's what I'm elected to do, is to represent the best interest of the community, which of course is made up of individuals and property owners from all different shapes and sizes, from single family to multiple family to commercial and the like. And so I think that's where this body works well, because we consider things in that line. Mr. Bug, I appreciate your patience in sitting here all through all this and being available through as a representative through all of this. But the goal of the developer is to transfer ownership of those lots to someone else, correct? And
That
so,
is right.
The property was first purchased.
2009 is when the original subdivision was platted.
Okay, and what kind of end date is kind of hoped for that this would be fully developed?
Well, there's a 20-year. It's subject to a 20-year annexation agreement. So the hope, of course, would be that it would be fully developed during that period of time, because we'd have to go back to the drawing board, so to speak, at the end of the 20-year period.
Right. So a considerable amount of risk on the part of the developer.
Correct.
Which, that's what developers do. And we don't assume that risk. I know we have helped modify that risk in some instances, some specific instances, again, to accomplish a specific purpose with development uptown and the like, but that's not what's happening here. Here, the property that's been identified is well-positioned for a lot of reasons. The changes that the developer has made help them to recoup some of that hoped-for investment over the next 10 years at least, because you've already been 10 years into it, and then beyond that you may be here asking for an extension given the nature of the market. The market changes in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. So I appreciate the responsiveness to try to protect what's already been built, the built part of the subdivision, by buffering it and coming back with a revised plan after hearing some of those concerns. So the risk is there. We can't take that risk away, and it's not our position or place to do that. But part of the point being, the developer is trying to sell, transfer ownership of that property and is not interested in doing something that's going to hinder their ability to do that as they see it. So to me, I think, this is, there are a lot of good things that have happened along the way, as many of you have outlined, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. And in my point of view, the process has worked, and it's worked pretty well. And as Ms. Davis mentioned earlier, site plan reviews are going to be public, and there'll be public input. I don't know that I'm interested in inviting design by committee on a new fire station or the site. I think it's up to us. We know some of the things that people are sensitive to. I'd like to see, it's easier to put a plan out there and let people comment on the plan than it is to take a lot of extra input on the design of something that most of us are not in a position to be designing. So anyway, those remarks, any other comments from the council? If none, clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
No.
Mr. Preston?
No.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye. The motion carries to approve the site plan. Moves us to item number 8 on our agenda. Let me find the page. Lost my.
There's a lot of pages. Oh.
Where's my? Yeah, I'm back in the addendum. A lot of addendum in this packet. There we go. All right, item 8, an ordinance rezoning property in the town of Normal, also known as the southwest corner of Blackstone Trails subdivision. Have a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Second.
Comments on the motion to rezone? Okay, hearing none. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye. Motion carries. And we have no new business on our agenda this evening. If any of the council people have concerns before we adjourn, like to hear them? Anyone? Mr. McBride.
I'll go ahead and be the one to thank our Public Works crew for all the work
Oh, yeah.
they've done the last couple of weeks. And I know it's hard, and we really appreciate all the time and effort.
I think we all would echo that, and I think we all would take issue with a couple of the emails we received regarding that as well. We had a lot of emails flying at us recently, and a couple there that to me seemed a bit unreasonable, but we are confident in our Public Works ability to get that job done, and they showed it, proved it again. Any other concerns?
Just really quickly, again, thank you to the town of Normal for presenting the proclamation in conjunction with the National League of Cities, which I'm an active participant. Well, we all are a participant of the National League of Cities, but I sit on one of the committees and is actively engaged in National League of Cities. Along with that, the effort to acknowledge a National Day of Racial Healing, which is part of our REAL program within National League of Cities. The Town of Normal Public Library has put together a wonderful listing of books that coincide with our celebration for today. So I would like to thank the Normal Public Library for doing that. And how else could people get the listing?
Well, for those of you in the room, we have the list on the little black table in the hallway with the agendas. For those listening, we will make sure and post this list. And I know at the Normal Public Library, they have it available as well. So thanks to Brian and Mary McKee specifically for putting this list together. And thank you, Councilmember Cummings, for mentioning it.
Very good. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen.
Aye. We are adjourned.